Hey, what's up, folks? Jimmy Smith with my post-fight breakdown of Tyron Woodley versus Colby Covington. Um, Anyway, we start at the bottom of the card. My picks did very well for the most part, and the ones that didn't go well, I think I got screwed. So anyway, I'll go into that in a minute. But all right, so let's start at the bottom of the main card, Kevin Holland versus Darren Stewart. I picked Kevin Holland. He did win by split decision over Darren Stewart. I wasn't able to catch all of this fight yet. I had to come back a little bit late, so I got to catch up on it. I only saw the last round, which Darren Stewart controlled and won with the takedown and ground and pound. A lot of people online are saying it was a robbery. I got to check it out and find out. I only got to see the last round, so I can't speak about it intelligently, but it went the way I thought it would with Kevin Holland winning. So my first pick goes right with Kevin Holland beating Darren Stewart. Got to check it out and break down the details for you later. Mackenzie Dern versus Randa Marcos. I have to talk about the odds in this one. I do picks and predictions on my SiriusXM radio show, and they have the betting odds, and I talk about the better bets and all this stuff and which ones, even if I think the other guy's going to win, it's a good bet, you know, a little side bet or whatever. I couldn't believe how close the odds were on this fight. I could not believe it. I mean, I think from memory, Mackenzie Dern was like minus 150 or 165 or something. What? Randa Marcos does everything on the ground. That's always been her bread and butter. That's how she wins her fights. And Mackenzie Dern has the better jiu-jitsu. So at some point, she's going to go to the ground with her, and I don't see her going to the ground with Mackenzie Dern not getting caught. And that's exactly what happened in the first round. When I saw the odds, I was like, I don't know who makes these things, but they don't know enough about jiu-jitsu because, you know, Randa Marcos she would have to totally change her style. And one thing I tweeted before the start of this fight is I wonder how this will change her. Will it be defensive wrestling? Defensive wrestling. Keep your opponent at bay with a jab, something like that. And went to the ground in about a minute. Of course, Mackenzie Dern tried some wild stuff on the feet, ended up losing her balance. But it's one of those things where she has so much confidence in her ground game. Okay, so you slip and fall. If your opponent follows you, you're going to submit him. So I didn't think that much of it. But Randa Marcos had no problem diving into that guard and ended up in a triangle immediately. And from then, it was the omoplata triangle armbar combo. And then to the sweep, to the armbar. That was it. It was like textbook jiu-jitsu. That's how you're supposed to do it. And so, anyway, I couldn't believe the odds on this one. I picked Mackenzie Dern to win by submission, and she did. I don't think anybody who knows anything about MMA would predict anything different in that fight. Especially with the odds, it really wasn't worth, you know, throwing some money at Randa Marcos. She's a 5-to-1 dog or something. Okay, it wasn't worth that at all. I didn't understand it. So, anyway, Mackenzie Dern understandably wins by submission. She moves on and moves up. Randa Marcos has win one, lose one her whole career so far. Johnny Walker, Ryan Spann. This one went bad for me. I picked Ryan Spann, and damn it, he almost did it. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing, where he rocks him with the left hook, drops him, swarms him, can't finish him, gets what's called triangle mount, where your knee's over the arm. Johnny Walker able to beast his way out of it. Very, very strong. Jesus, he just like lifted him off of him. Ryan Spann briefly went for the takedown. Johnny Walker postures out, they end up back of the feet. He hits him with left hook again. Now this time, when he hits him with the left hook, Walker hits him with a right. And so it actually dropped Walker, but Spann is clearly like rocked. And then he dives in for this takedown against a guy who's so long and so big, you're going to get trapped under there. And he can hit you with these hammer fists from half a mile away. And he got caught under there, and that's exactly what happened. Boom, 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 and knocks him out. And a lot of people were saying, well, he was rocked, so he went in for the takedown. You just knocked a dude down with your shot. You might be rocked, but don't dive for something positionally unsound on a guy that size. Even if you're rocked, take your time, move your feet, get your wits about you, and go back to what's working, which is the striking game. The striking game's working. So, yeah, he may have just been rocked and hurt and kind of went for it on instinct, but it was a really poor decision. A really poor decision. I always tell guys when I was training fighters, stay where you're winning. Stay where you're having success. Don't change up the game and I think I'll try this now. Hey, if you're winning the striking game, keep it striking. And he was winning the striking game. So the idea that he would want to change it around is, okay, I'm going to take him down now. I don't know what you're thinking there. And it's hard to take a guy like that down, especially with a low shot. End up in this low double leg position where your head's buried almost like an Iranian. and you get knocked out. And I was like, because all of my picks are going well, and we ran right into that one. And the thing is that Johnny Walker, he had lost 2 before that, one by knockout, one by decision. We're still seeing the same Johnny Walker. We're still seeing that kind of wild, crazy stuff. Well, you're going to get clipped by guys who are competent enough to throw a right hand at the right time, and that's what happened with Spann. So the problem with Johnny Walker moving forward is, okay, he can have fun fights. That I didn't see an elite light heavyweight from Johnny Walker. I didn't see that. I saw a guy who's just, tall and rangy and awkwardly built and explosive for his size and all that stuff, but he still makes the same tactical mistakes he made in his last 2 fights. He still fights the same way, very vulnerable to the takedown, very vulnerable to power punches, and that's not going to get him to the elite level in the UFC. It's just not. So what you look for are cleanups. What you look for are, okay, I lost, therefore I change X, Y, and Z, right? You look for I lost, therefore I must do, and then you make those adjustments, and that's how fighters get better, is they adjust based on their wins and losses, and things they don't do successfully, and things they do successfully. And with Walker, I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing a guy who's relying on essentially his physical gifts to get him through fights. And sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. And this time it worked, barely, but it only gets tougher above Ryan Spann, and Ryan Spann dropped you twice. So he's got to do something tactically to get better. He won, but he's got to improve his game a bit. So anyway, that pick went south. I'm 2-1 on my picks. Khamzat Chimaev versus Gerald Meerschaert. I picked Chimaev to win. I didn't think he would knock him out with the first punch he threw. I didn't think he'd do that. I didn't think it would last 17 seconds. I thought it'd be longer than that. Went out, literally the first power punch he threw, or first punch period, catches Gerald Meerschaert right on the chin, and he's out. Done. Finished. Boom. Wasn't extraordinarily well set up right hand. It was just bang, boom, right? Powerful, obviously, but most guys, you catch him on the jaw in that position, you're going to finish him. So I wish we would have learned more about Chimaev, honestly. I wish a guy like Gerald Meerschaert, and obviously I thought Chimaev was going to win. I picked him. I still thought Gerald Meerschaert might be able to drag him into the deeper water, slicker, more experienced, use some trickery, and see if we can learn how Chimaev deals with a little adversity. We didn't learn shit. We learned nothing about Chimaev other than, got a nice right hand, and if you catch him on the jaw, he's going to finish you. Okay, I expected that anyway. So, anyway, quick knockout for Chimaev. That pick goes my way. I'm 3-1. And then Cerrone versus Nico Price. I picked Nico Price to win this one. And he was going to win. And he fingered him in the eye 3 times and lost a point, and it ends up being a draw, which I thought was the right outcome. I thought Donald Cerrone won the 3rd round. So what did we learn about where Cowboy Cerrone is? He can still have entertaining fights with mid-level guys, which is what Nico Price is. What we didn't see, there were 2 things that were noticeably lacking. Nico Price was aggressive. Nico Price, kept the pressure on, all this stuff. He kept catching with this overhand right that, even when it didn't land clean, kept kind of landing. So one of the things that bothered me is Cowboy couldn't make the defensive adjustment to get around the one weapon that was constantly used against him. And that's something as a trainer you look for, which is like, look, if something works on you in the first round, it shouldn't work in the second round, really shouldn't work in the 3rd round. So you got to adjust. You got to make adjustments. Nico Price is throwing this goofy overhand right, and by goofy, I mean he's long and rangy, so the angle was a little awkward, and it kept landing, and it kept doing damage. And Donald just couldn't see the slowest and longest attack possible from Nico Price. That concerned me a little bit. But what we've seen from Cowboy, or what we did see from Cowboy in this fight is, sure, he can still have entertaining fights, but his ability to pull away late, meaning Nico Price won the first round. Even in his prime, Cowboy Cerrone was a slow starter. He tended to lose the first round anyway. Good example is the Eddie Alvarez fight. Eddie put it on him in that first round. And then Cowboy came back in the second and third and really put distance between him and Eddie and ended up winning that fight. His ability to kind of hit 5th gear in the second and third round isn't quite there. Yes, he outworked Nico Price in the 3rd round. Not by a whole lot, not by a ton. And it didn't get started until the 3rd round. 3-round fights, you need that second round. And so his ability to kind of like hit the gas and pull away, right? it used to be boom, he was gone. Now it's kind of like, okay, like, he pulled ahead in the third round, but it wasn't a dramatic pull away, and it didn't start early enough. Also, what I noticed, his combinations, and the word that just occurred to me that popped into my head as I was watching is they weren't crisp. He was landing good punches sometimes, and he was, caught Nico Price coming in and all stuff. They weren't sharp, crisp shots. They were more like boom rather than crack, these nice turned over punches he used to throw, and especially that head kick. He would throw it at Nico Price all the time, and Price could see it and at least get some defense up there, but it was more of a slapping kick. It wasn't like the one he threw against Rick Story, for example, that was bow, bow, snap, really turned over and really accurate. They were kind of slappy kicks he was throwing, so that sharpness of his attack wasn't there. They weren't the oh man, if that lands, you're in trouble. You got the feeling that a couple of those could have landed on Nico Price and he would have been all right. So those are the two things missing, is that pacing-wise, he always pulled away from guys after the first round, and he didn't really do that. And then the snapping, sharp strikes that would keep a guy like Nico Price away or put him away weren't there either. So Price was running into some punches, but they weren't fight-finishing punches. They weren't really damaging shots. So Cerrone, as apparently said, he's taking the rest of the year off, understandably, and he wants a rematch with Nico Price. He felt he lost that fight. And, he did lose the fight. The eye pokes equalized things. But this was the kind of guy and the kind of situation that the old Cowboy Cerrone would have done well against. And, got a draw out of it, but he was the inferior fighter that night. So let's see if you can right the ship. You can only do this so many times, folks. Like, you can only, as we will see in the finale, you can only kind of summon those vintage performances so many times before it's like, look, that ship sailed. You're a different fighter now. Speaking of Colby Covington versus Tyron Woodley, look, I picked Colby Covington to win. They looked like they had in their last few fights. Colby Covington had a lot of volume and a lot of pressure, a consistent takedown, and Tyron Woodley looked like he didn't want to be there, and he looked disinterested, and he didn't look athletic. He didn't look sharp. He didn't look good in any facet of the game. In any facet of the game. Colby Covington looked like Colby Covington. Tyron Woodley looked like this recent Tyron Woodley, not the guy who won the title. So people who wanted Colby Covington to lose and Tyron Woodley to win, mostly because they were disgusted with Colby Covington's politics, understandably. But I was talking to somebody, I think somebody from ESPN, and about breaking this fight down, and they said, man, I hope Colby Covington loses. And I said, I don't get paid to hope. I get paid to tell you guys who's going to win and tactically how things are going to go. I don't get paid to be optimistic about the fighter I want to win or anything like that. I don't take that personally. So, and there was no reason to believe Tyron Woodley was going to win this fight. As I said with Cowboy, you don't just reach back and become the fighter you once were because you really don't like a guy. I mean, his fans were hoping, people who didn't like Colby were hoping that we suddenly, for some reason, got a guy that hasn't shown up in 10 rounds. But there's no reason to believe that logically. There's no reason to believe that with your head. You can believe that with your heart, but there's no, last two fights he's looked awful, and this fight he looked awful. So that's the way it goes. Now, Colby Covington's getting a lot of praise for this fight, but I don't know. Colby looked like Colby. Colby didn't do anything particularly special. He looked like he always does against a guy who has really looked terrible in his last few fights. So does it get him a title shot? Probably. There might be one more in there. But it doesn't make sense, and some people are saying Chimaev, it doesn't make sense for Dana White to spend all that capital in one fight, right? You have two guys who are really hot right now. Why would you use them both up on each other when you can send them in different directions and make money off each one? It's just promotionally, it doesn't make – it might be an interesting fight, I guess. I think it's a little too much for Chimaev right now at this stage in his career. But I don't see many options other than the winner of Burns-Usman. Sure, he could fight Masvidal. I think his wrestling's too good for Masvidal. I think stylistically that's a terrible matchup. But there are options for him at 170. But the one that makes the most sense is he waits around for the title fight. And it should work out timing-wise. So, yeah, people that were hoping for a Tyron Woodley vintage performance were thinking with their hearts, and they weren't thinking with their heads. The worst part to me is that, as I said, on Twitter, somebody said, man, I was interacting with somebody, and they said, oh, man, Tyron looks terrible, looks horrible. And I said, he looks disinterested, which is even worse to me. He looked almost apathetic, like he was just trying to make it, like he got paid by the round, and so he's trying to bank as many rounds as he could. He didn't look mentally in this fight. He didn't look physically in this fight. He didn't offer any meaningful offense. I knew as soon as Colby Covington hit that takedown a minute into the first round, it's going to be a long night for Tyron Woodley. You shouldn't hit that easy of a takedown that quickly while Tyron Woodley still has a ton of energy. And he was an All-American wrestler. That shouldn't be that easy. As soon as it was, I was like, oh, this is done. And then the whole time, Tyron Woodley is literally like scraping against the cage. Like, he's so far back and kind of hanging out there, which is the worst thing to do against Colby Covington. It's the worst place to be, is against the cage where he can press forward. You don't have anywhere to go. So he just did everything wrong from the beginning. And I don't want to see Tyron Woodley fight ever again. I really don't. Even if you could get a mid-level guy or something like that, it's like, okay, you've lost 14 rounds in a row. And you're on your way to losing 15 when you got a rib injury. That's an unprecedented run at the elite level. 14 rounds on all 3 judges' scorecards. I don't know if I've ever seen that. 14 rounds in a row on all 3 judges' scorecards. I've never. That's crazy. Tyron Woodley's done. So, just a quick comment about kind of the stakes of this in terms of, obviously, this had political battle lines all over it, right? The Trump MAGA people versus Black Lives Matter. It was an incredibly political fight. This wasn't Ali Frazier, which, if you've studied your history, was a fight during a similar political climate. But a couple things. I got to talk about this. Frazier didn't put that on himself. Other people put that on him. He did not publicly come out and support the Vietnam War. He didn't come out and publicly repudiate the Black Power movement. He didn't do any of that. The hard hats, or conservatives at the time in 1968, just in the late 60s, 70s, early 70s, put that on Frazier as kind of the anti-Ali. And Ali was very brash and all that stuff. But Frazier really wasn't. Frazier didn't do that. He was the son of a sharecropper. I mean, he didn't, put that on himself. People put that on him. So also, these, Ali Frazier was the first time undefeated heavyweights had fought for the heavyweight title. This was not on that level. Meaning, Tyron Woodley, people were really hoping Tyron Woodley put in a vintage performance. This wasn't, 2 guys in their prime, oh my God, both fighting for the highest stakes in the world. This wasn't that. This was a really faded Tyron Woodley trying to maybe have a vintage performance against a guy he had personally had a lot of beef with and had a lot of history with. So people putting a lot on this, I'm like, okay, I understand you're being upset about Colby Covington's politics, but it's a fight. It's one fight. Colby Covington can't vote multiple times, So people putting more on this fight and obviously the fighters put a lot on it as well. But, Tyron Woodley, if you were hoping Tyron Woodley could salvage something with this, you weren't paying attention in the last couple of fights. So I hope this is the end for Tyron Woodley. Colby Covington probably moves on to a title fight, which would be a lot tougher for him because Kamaru Usman, Gilbert Burns, those guys are monsters. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, picks went all right that night. So I'll do a breakdown before the next one, and we'll see how I do. Talk to you later.